Hey guys, what's up? So, with the current situation being as it is and people having to stay at home, I thought I'd be doing these daily anime based quizzes. Today we'll be focusing on Bleach. This isn't a series I was too familiar with as it was being produced because I wasn't really aware of it. My brother made me aware of it a couple of years ago, just before kind of the release of what was the final arc, which meant I pretty much was able to just watch everything outright, unlike most of you who had to wait for each episode to be released and each of the series to be released. There is also the production of the final arc, which has been confirmed. Obviously, that's going to probably be held back as well because of this situation. But it even if we don't get a English dub of it, at least if they're able to subtitle it, that should be good enough. So, question one is: what is the name of the beam technique used by Hollows? I'm not looking for the technique used by some of the more powerful Hollows or the various other bits of the technique. I'm just looking for the actual basic technique that's used. It's used by a Gillian very early on. I think it was like episode 20 in Bleach. No, I think it was before then. It was probably like 13 or 14, where Ichigo and Uryu had to battle one of the giant hollows, and it fired one of these beams at them. And the answer is a Cero. In Japanese, in Spanish, this means zero. In Japanese, this is referred to as Hollow Flash, or Doom Blast, and can be used by the Menos, the Aranka, and the Visors. Those that use it fire a powerful blast of concentrated spiritual energy at the target, while in most cases it is fired from the mouth, as is the case for the first one. Some Aranka and Visors can fire Ceros from their hands, the fingers, and other parts of their bodies. This often requires the user to take on a specific pose, with the only exception to this being Stark, who fires Ceros from his pistols. The power, force, speed, and blast area of the Cero is dependent on the strength, spiritual power, and in some cases the skill of the user. So the stronger the user, the stronger the attack. And there are some Aronka who can come up with their own variations of a Cero, and the charging and firing time for Ceros varies from charging relatively fast to firing it instantaneously, and firing one without much charging. Out of all the Ceros used, the colour that was most common ended up being crimson red. This kind of makes sense with the element of death associated with red and anger. In comparison, blast by the user here is one of the least used. I think only two use it. It's this Arrancar, who is under Lord Baragon's kind of, it's his servant, and Ukiora, who is the fourth espada. Question 2 is: which of the espada is ranked the highest, and what caused their number to change? This is one of the things that Kubo likes to add to his series, including Bleach. He doesn't like it to be a very straightforward answer. He always tries to mix things up. So the original espada that was supposed to be the most powerful was Coyote Stark, but this didn't end up being the case, as his number was 1, and there was actually a different espada who, when they evolved, when they changed and released their Zanpakuto, they ended up gaining a higher rank from it. And the answer is Yami. When he transforms and releases his Zanpakuto, the number warps into a 0. He is one of the largest, if not the largest, of the current espada. He has a very strong build and ridge-lined cranium. He has brown eyes, black hair, long bushy sideburns, and a thin ponytail reaching his upper back. Aside from this, he is bald. He has orange eyebrows and red markings under his eyes. He wears the standard espada uniform, with the only difference being his jacket is always open. Like all Aronka, he has a large hole, signifying his previous time as a hollow. His is located in the centre of his chest. What remains of his hollow mask is the jawbone, which has 8 teeth along it, which rests on his chin, and a tattoo of the number 10, signifying Yami's rank, is on his left shoulder. In his released form, the 1 melts away, leaving just the 0. Okay, so question 3 is, which of the espada did Ichigo meet first? He met 2 espada, therefore that gives you a bit of a hint, and this was actually in Karakura, when he could sense a very powerful spiritual pressure coming from a centralized point. He could also sense the number of people that were being taken down just purely from the spiritual pressure, rather than from anything else. And the answer is Yami and Yugioh. They were sent from Aizen to kind of have a look at the world of the living, to identify, any potential threats to Aizen. Yugioh managed to identify a couple of these powerful spirits that were living in the world normally, and tried to target them. Unfortunately, Yami got really annoyed because people kept staring at him. Yugioh had to explain that it's not them staring at him because they can't see him. They're staring at the hole that was in the ground that they created once they landed. This is the reason they did that. Yami got quite angry and said that he didn't really care, and basically took down most of them with his spiritual pressure. There were very few people who were able to withstand that, including one of Ichigo's long-term friends, who was able to kind of sustain it, but was then dealt with by Yami and Yugioh. Okay, so question 4 is, in which episode do we see the actual release of Yumichika's Zanpakuto? He is the 5th seed as of the series, within Squad 11, who had a very specific direction that they can only use physical attacks, and that anything to use with the Kido is considered laughable, and that anyone who isn't using a direct attack Zanpakuto is a coward. This is part of the reason why he couldn't use his Zanpakuto, and actually gives it a name that his Zanpakuto hates. By referring it to this name, it doesn't fully release. Instead, it just kind of spreads out into multiple blades. Therefore, Yumichika is able to use it as a direct attacking Zanpakuto as is required. However, given situations where he is able to kind of hide this, he is able to go into his full release for his Zanpakuto. This was seen with Charlotte Coolhorn, whose release creates this black atmosphere, which only he and Charlotte could be viewed in. Charlotte was specifying that the reason for this is that he will suffer in beauty because they all both had this kind of fetish over how they looked, and this is when Yumichika realizes he can go to his full strength. And the answer is episode 217. This Charlotte is one of Lord Baragon's fraction, therefore one of his most powerful hollows, who he has access to, whose attempt was to try and destroy the buildings that were stopping the real Karakura town from being shown, because they were using some dimensional abilities. This originally, Charlotte is part of 4 almost like commanders within those regions. You have another 3. Question 5 is, which of the privaron espada fought against Soifon? These are the strongest of the espada, and he had a specific rank to him. This was seen quite late on within the fight, because he couldn't be bothered with the current situation, and he had his hollow kind of workforce to do a lot of what he required before he saw how useless they were in battle, and because they ended up getting defeated, he ended up having to deal with the situation himself. And the answer is the number 2 espada, Balagun Wizenbarn. He appears as an elderly man with a left olive green eye, a white moustache, and white hair. His face is lined by large scars on the left side of his chin that goes down to his neck and across his eye. Despite his aged appearance, Baragon is quite stocky and muscular, and when standing, he is of a fair size. He wears a regal white leather cloak with black fur lining, short sleeves, and 3 black fur stripes running along the bottom. He wears a golden wristband on both wrists and a belt consisting of 3 thick chains attached to a large metal disc with a sun emblem. Overall, he resembles a barbarian lord of Viking origin, and the remnants of his hollow mask take the form of a 5-pointed crown just above his forehead. The location of his espada tattoo is unknown. He didn't actually show this to anyone, and he's considered the god king of Hueco Mundo and the ruler of Las Noches. The part of death that he represents is referred to as time. It's considered to be one of the, if not the strongest abilities of all the espada. What his mist covers will therefore age. So if he's seen to be able to attack Soifon, and she notices her, I think it's her arm, actually ends up being turned into just bone. She ends up having to kind of attack herself in order to prevent the spread of the mist. This was also his weakness, because whilst he was able to use this as a power, and his ability meant that he wouldn't directly be impacted by it, it was noticed by someone that if he got infected with this, he would suffer the same situation as anyone else would. therefore what the person did was they allowed their arm to be infected. They cut their arm off, transferred it to the middle of Baragon, and then he ended up suffering from his own time effects. So question 6 is, which of the espada represents the aspect of loneliness? Each of them represent a different form of death. I've already mentioned Baragon's, which is time, so that one's counted out. But can you actually remember which one is loneliness? And the particular espada is incredibly powerful, though is weakened a little bit by its own kind of ability. And the answer is Quixote Stark. He is seen alongside his other half, which is Linonet Gingerbuck. This is because what he's able to do is split himself into... He was able to split another part of his personality, therefore he had someone to accompany him. He is considered the first espada, and before we saw any sort of change to Yami, this was what he was. He is a character with bluish-grey eyes, wavy brown hair which ends at the base of his neck. He's very unkempt and a faded goatee. His clothing is typical of the Arrancar. He wears a white jacket outlined in black, though altered with the collar upturned. A back sash is worn in a manner similar to a matador around his waist, and he wears white gloves. The remains of his hollow mask consist of a fanged bottom jaw, which is positioned along his neck. His hollow hull is on his sternum, right below the tip of his mask, and his espada tattoo is featured on the back of his left hand, which is usually hidden underneath his gloves. He is considered to be quite lazy and doesn't really intend to kind of fight. This is seen when he tries to face Shinsui Kiraku, but because of the strength that Shinsui kind of posed, he was concerned enough to actually have to use his full strength. He is considered to be quite merciful because he doesn't have that kind of killer instinct that some of the other espada have, such as Grimjow, and where possible does not want to have to face anyone unless ordered to do so. He was required to recapture Orihime at one point. And his sword, once released, ends up as guns which are able to fire multiple Sero very quickly. In a normal circumstance, that would be enough to kind of take out an opponent. However, against Shinsui, this proved to be quite difficult, as he was able to avoid most of them relatively easily. So question 7 is, which of the espada was not a Vasto Lorde? The only espada to have reached this rank without having that set of power is actually ranked as the lowest espada for that very same reason. It didn't reach the level of the others, but had enough power to kind of warrant using and having this position, according to Eisen. However, ironically, when it goes begging out for help to prevent itself from being killed, Eisen just sits and is seen smiling at his death. And the answer is Aranero Arareri. He is the 9th espada and is has a face which is usually concealed behind a lengthened white mask covered with 8 holes. He wears this while in the light as a way of protecting himself. Also whilst around his other espada. As he has grown concerned of questions and often remarks regarding his appearance, in place of a normal head, he has a large glass capsule filled with red liquid, and he has two small hollow heads which are suspended within the liquid. One is a male and one is a female. The two heads are both tattooed with the number 9 and tend to speak in response to each other, giving the effect of two people speaking in turn. The upper head speaks with a deep voice, while the other speaks in a high-pitched childlike voice, and each head appears to have its own level of individuality. It's not dual conscious, each has a personality. Like most of the espada, he wears a dress garb that covers his entire body, as opposed to the normal jacket. He is especially, in terms of his personality, very proud of his ability to continue to grow and to develop by the consumption of hollows, including the one in which consumed the lieutenant of Squad 13, who was in charge of Rukia, and she was unable to help in the past. And this creates a level of torture for her, as he's able to transform into that lieutenant and to use any of the skills and techniques used by him, especially considering that he could kind of use the muscle memory in the same way, creating the same level of attacks. He is also mentioned to be the only espada to have the Gillian status, which is the weakest class of menace, and is the last of the first generation of espada. Question 8 is, what were the names of the 3 former espadas that were demoted? There were 3 espadas that they faced, which possessed 3 figures. You have the normal espada, which are ranked 0 to 9. Anything above that are kind of the lower class, which assist the espadas, and then those that are in the 3 figures 100 and above are former espada. That's so they still have a level of respect attached to them, but they are kind of considered fallen espada because of things that they've done, which have meant that they no longer are deserving of that place. And the answers are Dordoni, Alessandro, della Socaccio, Cirucci, Sanderwicci, and Gantenbainne, Mosqueda. Each of these faced one of the either a Soul Reaper or someone else. So Dordoni faced Ichigo, Cirucci faced Yugioh, and Mosqueda faced Chad. Each of them had techniques which kind of worked against these specific espada, but it did push Ichigo to having to use his Bonkai, which he became quite reliant on in order to protect Nell, who he hadn't realised was kind of following him. Question 9 is, what is the name of the lieutenant of Squad 11? Like all of the other squads, all of the lieutenants were actually mentioned at some point or another, even if not all of them actually had much of an appearance. I think this is one of the ones that was seen more often and had more interactions with Ichigo and his friends. And the answer is Yachiru. She is considered to be quite powerful. However, she tends to not become very aggressive. She's seen as a little kid who just wants to have fun. There is an interesting point as well where she was just hanging around watching and kind of staring into the air. Someone was trying to send her a message, and she said, "Not now." And she kept saying this a couple of times before she actually ended up losing her temper, and the person ended up leaving before they were getting, well, basically killed. She did look like she'd gotten to that point in her temper. The final question is, what is the name of the lieutenant of Squad 10? We see this lieutenant pretty much one of the most frequently and is good friends with Ichigo and the rest of the team. This individual has quite unusual powers, but they are seen as being incredibly useful and has interactions with other members, including other captains. And the answer is Rangiku Matsumoto. She has a relation with Gin, who was the captain of Squad 3 before he basically disowned his squad. They had some kind of relationship, and she was seen being protected by him at some point, as well as when she tried to challenge Aizen to fight. She lost against the Espada's kind of pet, which they were able to kind of use the powers against. She also is very good friends with Shuhei Hisagi and Izuru, who are the lieutenants of Squad 7 and Squad 3. So how do you guys get on with the quiz? Was there anything interesting you found? Did you already know this kind of information? Leave your comments down below. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed it, and don't forget to subscribe.